Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
On this week's program, leading professors in public affairs and political science at the University of Minnesota offer their points of view on the coming midterm election. Plus, a key Senate committee seeks clarity on Minnesota's clean car standards. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. Lawn signs, campaign ads, and media coverage are telegraphing the coming midterm election, where in Minnesota, voters will choose candidates to represent them in Congress, in the offices for Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State, and State Auditor. The election will also determine all 201 seats in the state legislature. Joining me to offer his perspective on the coming election is the founder and director of the Center for the Study of Politics and Governance at the University of Minnesota, Dr. Larry Jacobs. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.
I'd like to start by talking about media and the information landscape. I make it a point to watch and read a wide variety of news sources, and it seems that one's views on current events and even what those current events actually are can be determined based on where that news is coming from. So in your view, to what degree are news and social media companies contributing to the seeming bifurcation of society?
It's huge. If you go back 50, 60 years ago, you had a few networks and they tended to show similar takes on what was happening in the world. There wasn't really a dispute about the facts. The parties would take a different approach on those facts. Today we have a very different media environment that's both traditional media and social media. And what we're finding is that the partisans are seeking out media sources that tend to reinforce their own already existing attitudes. And once they're on those media sources, the information they're getting tends to reinforce or actually produce new perceptions, misperceptions, and a sense of risk. So I think we're in a pretty serious situation where our understanding of reality is quite different across the parties.
Historically, candidates campaign with a platform, vote for me because I promote these things and I offer these solutions. Some of the advertising dollars, though, that we're seeing spent across the media landscape are telling a different story related to more national themes like the economy or crime or immigration or abortion rights. How can a voter discern what the candidates on their ballot stand for?
It's hard work. We have had a process of nationalization in which a lot of the media, with the exception of this program, have stopped covering state and local news as they once did. And the result is that voters are queuing. They're looking at what's happening nationally with the big national personalities like Biden or some of the Republicans. And that's how they're interpreting what's going on in their state. This is happening all over the country. And it's one of the reasons that we see presidential choice in states corresponding pretty closely with the choice of governors, because the media environment, the information are so similar now because of the nationalization of news information. For voters, you've really got to be very resourceful. You've got to be willing to do research online. You may want to go hear the candidates if you're able to do that, but it's not something that's readily available for most voters, and I think it's a shame.
The myth that the 2020 election was stolen is still being used among some candidates for office. As a political scientist and someone who watches government closely, are you concerned about what this could mean long-term for the integrity of our voting system?
It is one of our biggest threats to our country right now, is the sense that our electoral process is deeply flawed, that one party has got an advantage over the other. I'm pleased to see the bipartisan work that's gone on in Congress that is now rewriting the Electoral Count Act, which was a 19th century law that President Trump took advantage of. That is strictly bipartisan. I think that's a good sign. I also think the role of the courts in reviewing what is going on in the states by election officials is very important, because we do seem to have a high level of respect for those courts, but it's going to take time. There's no doubt that the credibility and legitimacy of our electoral process taken a big hit over the last year and a half.
Midterm elections are historically good for the party that is not in power, meaning that this should be a good year for the Republicans. Many pundits have speculated that the overturning of Roe v. Wade could put a dent in that Republican momentum. On the other hand, others believe that the economic uncertainty highlighted by the high cost of gas and food could take precedence. So is it a toss-up?
Well, I think it's going to be a very close election, but I would say at this point that the environment certainly favors Republicans. It favors Republicans more in states that tilt in a Republican direction. Minnesota is kind of a state where we have political parity with a little bit of a Democratic advantage, particularly in statewide races. So I don't think it's going to play out here the same. But the way I would put it is the Supreme Court made an historic decision to reverse the abortion rights established by Roe v. Wade. That had a tremendous impact in mobilizing women in particular to become involved in this election cycle. That's faded a little bit. And we've seen the attention to abortion on the national agenda slip, so now we have inflation and crime above it. I think the key question is going to be which set of demographics will the abortion issue register and turn out young people? Will it turn out women? And it doesn't take a whole lot to impact some of the elections here in Minnesota, particularly the state legislative races, which are often decided by hundreds or a few thousand votes.
There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. There are supply chain issues. There's economic uncertainty at home and abroad for a number of reasons. There's extreme weather events that are becoming more frequent. How do you think the uncertainty plays out among voters? Do they vote rationally or emotionally?
Well, I think we're in a time of anxiety, and it's understandable. That does not help the incumbents because the incumbents want to tell you things are going well, re-elect me. And what voters are feeling is, oh my God, what's going on here? Why isn't the situation better controlled? So it doesn't work well for incumbents. I think it could be a factor that will contribute to losses by some Democrats. I think it was a factor that contributed to Donald Trump's loss, even though there were some things that Trump and his supporters could point to as positives.
In the moments we have left, I want your take, if you're willing to give it, on Minnesota's election outcome. Will Minnesota remain a divided government in the legislature and the governor's office? What's your take?
Well, I think the Democrats have an advantage in statewide races. And the reason for that is because the big population centers, the Twin Cities and some of the other outlying cities, tend to vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. And the Democrats have been doing better also in the suburbs, though not all the suburbs. So that gives them a large number of votes. When it comes to legislative races, the Democrats have a hard time getting support in outstate, and that's going to work against them. So I think the Democrats could well win statewide, but I do think the Republicans are going to do better in the legislative races and will hold the Senate, might even pick up the House.
Dr. Larry Jacobs, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. California's recent announcement that it would ban the sale of gas-powered vehicles in 2035 prompted a key Senate committee to review Minnesota's current clean car goals.
The Clean Car Minnesota rule applies to manufacturers. The Clean Cars Minnesota standards do not require any individual dealer to have EVs on their lot. Clean Cars Minnesota is not making Minnesotans purchase a new EV. It is not outlawing internal combustion engines. It is not regulating tractors or combines or small engines like lawnmowers, chainsaws, boats, or all-terrain vehicles. It is not taking away people's F-250s or Silverado trucks. It is not taking away people's snowblowers and landscaping equipment. It is simply giving Minnesotans more choices, supporting our EV businesses, and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions.
Do we have a Minnesota standard now or don't we?
Mr. Chair, yes, the standard in place is called the Minnesota Clean Car Standard.
And that's going to be for how long of a period from now?
Mr. Chair, the standard, the Clean Cars Minnesota standard will be in effect through model year 2025.
So one more year, unless we go with California.
So the model years are different than the calendar years.
Yeah.
So when I say it will end at the end of model year 2025, that is the end of calendar year 2024. And at that time, Minnesota will revert back to the federal emission standards unless a proactive action is taken to adopt the Advanced Clean Cars 2 standards.
There's one article that I read recently from MinPost that kind of sums it up well. It says that why would Minnesota move ahead with implementing the clean car rule if it's only going to be in effect for 1 year? And my understanding is, based on what you've said today, that this rule is only going to be in place for 1 year. So the biggest question I have is what is the purpose of doing this for 1 year?
Commissioner.
Chair Ingebrigtsen and Senator Eichhorn, as I've noted, each additional electric vehicle and low emission vehicle that is sold in Minnesota actually improves air pollution problems in Minnesota. So there is benefit by enacting and seeing the increase to consumers of choice and seeing consumers make that choice.
You said you're not planning at this point to continue with California Cars 2.0, and we appreciate that, but in a hypothetical scenario, if the state did decide to go into rulemaking on California Cars 2.0, would that result in the ban of combustion engines in this state?
Commissioner.
Chair Ingebrigtsen and Senator Eichhorn, I just want to reiterate that at this time we are not adopting Advanced Clean Cars 2, and that we're focused on Clean Cars Minnesota and an approach that makes sense for the state of Minnesota. If we were to proactively decide that we wanted to go through an additional rulemaking to adopt Advanced Clean Cars 2, there would be a long process that would be open to public input, and it would again follow the rigor that you've heard others describe that includes a statement of need and reasonableness, an economic analysis, as well as an administrative law judge hearing.
Again, follow up on that, Mr. Chair. So if I realize you're not doing it now, but if the state were to do that, if we were to adopt the California Emission Standards 2.0 or whatever you want to call it, would the sale of combustion engines at that point be banned in the state of Minnesota?
Commissioner.
Chair Ingebrigtsen, I will describe what we know of California's standards, which are that they are on a path for ZEV, the emission standards that apply to electric vehicles, to have new cars in 2035 be 100% electric vehicles. New cars sold in the state of California, and that is not something we are proactively doing right now in Minnesota.
Today, I want to tell rural Minnesota, we're not California. We are not acting like we're California. We're not going to adopt rules from California. We're not banning anything in Minnesota because California is banning combustion engines in California. We're not doing that. Don't have any fear that we're going to act like legislators from California because we love our state. And we're going to do what is best for people in rural Minnesota, suburban Minnesota, and metro because you matter to us.
I'm so glad to hear you say that we should quit talking about California. I'm all for it. I really am. I hope the governor's listening, because there's a whole lot of people out there that don't like us talking about comparing California.
The choices voters make in the coming November election will determine Minnesota's next direction. Will Minnesotans continue to choose a divided government, or will one party take charge of the governor's office, the Senate, and the House of Representatives? Joining me to offer her perspective is University of Minnesota political science professor, Dr. Kathryn Pearson. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
So as we approach the 2022 election, what is jumping out at you, and how are you viewing this current political landscape?
Well, first, political context matters. And we know that historically, the party that's in the White House always faces an uphill battle in midterm elections. And that's in races for the US Congress, but also statewide elections as well. So sort of going into this election, because President Biden is a Democrat, Democrats face additional challenges. Added to that, President Biden isn't very popular, particularly among independents and Republicans. And overall, his popularity ratings are sort of hovering in the 40s. And so that doesn't bode well for Democrats, again, running at the congressional level and in races across the country. Having said that, candidates matter, and in state races, sort of every district's political and partisan composition matters.
According to the most recent campaign finance reports in the state of Minnesota, the DFL has outraised the GOP as we head into Election Day. What impact will fundraising ultimately have on races statewide?
Well, it's a sign of strength for the DFL in Minnesota, both in statewide races and in legislative races, where the parties have raised more. The DFL has raised more than the Republicans, and that allows DFLers to have an edge when it comes to hiring staff, contacting voters, running ads, and really get their messaging out. So midterm elections tend to see turnout about 20 points lower than presidential elections do. So both parties are really trying to mobilize their voters, mobilize the voters that came out 2 years ago and voted for their party's candidates.
With a polarized electorate, many races will likely be very close, and some may require extra time to count the ballots. This isn't new, as we've had close elections in the past, but what is new is that there is a segment of the population that continues to believe that the 2020 election was stolen. How do you see this impacting the 2022 election?
Well, this dynamic is troubling, that the legitimacy of elections is called into question, especially an election where secretaries of state in all 50 states certified the election results. And so we are seeing many candidates who are running who either won't answer questions about the legitimacy of the 2020 election or are saying it is not legitimate. We'll see what happens in 2022. Some races will be close. We're looking at about a couple of dozen potentially close state legislative races and potentially some close statewide races in Minnesota and frankly across the country. And so we'll see how long it takes to determine the results, but Minnesota has been through this before. Just think back to 2008 when Al Franken was sworn in as U.S. Senator after recounts and sort of going through the ballots in July. We also saw a protracted recanvassing in 2010 in the gubernatorial race. And so Minnesotans have been through this before, but both sides agreed that the process was fair. And so ultimately, I have confidence in the Secretary of State's office and the process, but I think that politically it could be contentious.
In the governor's race, both sides have had what some journalists are calling unforced errors, referring to Governor Walz's response to the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme in which $250 million was allegedly embezzled from a pandemic meals program. And then most recently to the incident where Republican candidate Scott Jensen repeated the internet hoax that schools are providing litter boxes for children who are dressed as cats. Do these types of incidents change voters' minds?
They don't change voters' minds, but they sort of change the calculus of candidate support. So one of the things that political scientists have really picked up on in the last several cycles is the rise of negative partisanship. And that is a feeling, not the partisanship where you have a close attachment to your own party, but instead great animosity toward the other party. And we're seeing a rise in negative partisanship as a motivation for vote choice. In other words, I'm not so much going to vote for the candidate that I like, but I'm going to vote against the candidate that I really dislike. And so, of course, partisan predispositions affect how individuals are taking in this news. So if someone from your party that you like is sort of has an unforced error, you might be more willing to ignore it and focus on the things that you like about that candidate. But it just adds to this negative partisanship when individuals are sort of collecting things that they dislike about the other candidate. And it could turn off voters who may be unsure if they're going to vote or not in a midterm. Again, turnout is often lower. And so both candidates have to think about sort of motivating their own base and not turning off potential voters.
Republican ads are pointing to the rise in crime and increasing inflation as reasons to vote their candidates into office. DFLers are pointing to the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade as a reason to vote for DFL candidates. Both sides are touting their varying approaches to education. Are these the issues that you believe are top of mind to voters?
Yes, and surveys suggest that these are the issues that voters are most concerned about. And each party is also playing to their strength. So if you look at national public opinion polls, in general, voters see Republicans as doing a better job with crime, doing a better job with the economy. And so it's no surprise that Republicans are touting those issues. Polls also suggest that Democrats do a better job as a party on the issue of abortion. And so it's not surprising that Democrats are talking about abortion as a way to really motivate the Democratic base, perhaps get voters to the polls who aren't that enthusiastic about Joe Biden, but would otherwise vote Democratic, and sort of knowing that this is an issue that matters in every state in the wake of the Dobbs decision. And so both parties' candidates are trying to motivate their voters on issues where they're thought to do a better job. Education is an issue that's more evenly divided. And so candidates are trying to talk to voters about sort of their strengths on the issue of education.
Before we have to go, you mentioned a moment ago that turnout tends to be lower in the midterm elections. In Minnesota, who will determine the outcome of this election? Will it be independent voters? Will it be suburban voters? Which demographic groups are key?
Well, it depends on the elections that we're talking about. So if we're talking about the state Senate, there are about 5 Senate districts that are really competitive and will determine party control. Bucks Senate seat, St. Cloud, a couple of suburban seats, and then about 15 House districts that will determine party control as well. And so look to those districts for party control. But then if we're talking about the statewide elections, sort of each candidates are playing to their party's base and strengths. So we see Scott Jensen campaigning a lot in northern Minnesota, rural Minnesota, and we see Waltz in many areas of the state as well. But for Democrats to do well in statewide elections, turnout in Hennepin County, Ramsey County really needs to be high. And those are areas where, for the most part, with a few exceptions, there are not that many competitive state legislative races. And so we also see DFLers really trying to motivate that base in the metro area because we've seen in past elections that a big advantage in the metro for the DFL really helped statewide candidates. Turnout in 2018 was about 64%. That was a high turnout midterm. But I expect that with partisans on both sides highly motivated, we'll see similar levels of turnout in 2022.
Dr. Kathryn Pearson, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
We close this week's program with a look at one of the memorials at the Capitol. 748 Minnesotans died in the Korean War, which began in June of 1950 and ended in July of 1953. Paul Mandel of the Capitol Area Architectural Planning Board joins me here at the Korean Memorial. What was the impetus for this memorial?
Well, after the Vietnam War memorial went in, the Korean War, of course, it was called a conflict, not even a war. They considered themselves the forgotten war. And even though they had a plaque, just like the Vietnam folks had, they said, well, we were forgotten, so can we get a memorial? And at the time, the Korean Memorial in Washington, D.C. had gone in just opposite the Vietnam Memorial. So this site became important sort of as a mirror to the Vietnam Memorial. They were older. We had 2 gentlemen that we work with through the main part of the group, and they're known with their blue jackets when they dress up. So we had the entryway. You have the various aspects, and even in the stone, which has now been replicated in the plaque inside the memorial space, you had the important dates of the conflict, as well as all the countries represented that took part in the war.
Yes, because the United States was just one of many that was involved in this conflict, which is ongoing because there was no peace treaty signed.
We have explained to them that, I mean, even as recent as these past few years, when Korea flares up, we've explained to them that if we go back and there's deaths, those names would be added. And even because of that, the fact that the war technically was never ended, they had an armistice, the names here, unlike in Vietnam where they're by date, here they're just scattered among. So all the names are included, but they're not in any particular order. So if you have a name added later on, there's no distinction between that name and the previous names.
Probably the most striking feature of this memorial is the sculpture of the soldier looking at his silhouette. What's being conveyed?
Probably the most important element is his search for his comrades, search for answers. I mean, those of us who grew up with MASH, you know, you see the questions, what is the end point, what is the goal, how do we know if we've succeeded, the fact that it never ended, the fact that it was just an armistice, not even a treaty. He walks towards his silhouette in the obelisk, which is larger than life, and actually it's on line with the Capitol Dome. So he's coming back to Minnesota. It was interesting because the vets studied the mock-up of this, and they were like, no, the belt would not be like that. No, these hand grenades were, you know, in 1952, they were not the hand grenades of the Vietnam War and the fatigues, and right down to the belt buckles and everything else. They studied every detail of this guy, and the sculptor kept, you know, while it was still in clay, kept molding it.
What are some of the unique features of this particular memorial?
Here, just like in the Vietnam Memorial, we have a map of Korea showing the Sea of Japan, the two Koreas, China. A lot of international folks have come here, and we have all the countries represented both in the flooring and now in the plaque that represent all the nations. So all the nations are included, even though this is a Minnesota Memorial. On the sides of the obelisks, we have, at first it was going to be the seals of the different branches of the armed forces, which we figured wouldn't mean anything to anyone except the members of the armed forces. So we have like a tank and a soldier on their feet for the infantry. We have a plane for the Air Force. We have ships for the Navy. So we made it literal representations of the different branches of the armed forces. And then the names, in part, like we have them alphabetical, but like I said, scattered among the letters, so there's no order, there's no first name or last name type, who's first and who's last type thing. And if we added names, it would be very democratic, and you wouldn't know that that was an added name.
The Korean conflict memorial was completed in 1998. It's been more than 20 years now since it was placed here. What are you hearing from people that have visited over the years?
Probably it's one of the more reflective and meditative ones. I mean, the Vietnam was, because some of the people had trouble getting up to the wall, this one is so approachable, and it really, they can get into this intimate space. They can sit, they can go off in the lawn area, they can go up and touch the names, but they can also just study the soldier and sit there and study the soldier or his silhouette. When people come to visit the governor's office from foreign countries, this is one of the ones they stop at for some reason, and they come down and they'll often contact the Korean veterans. Because a lot of their dignitaries, a lot of their people will purposely, they'll have a visiting group from Japan or whatever else, and they'll always come to this memorial because of the country's connection to that conflict.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.